Greetings. I am Dr. Noni Davis, coming to you from Sya Academy. And I am a legacy owner of Sya Academy. I always start there because I want to share that I have been blessed. I inherited this school from my parents, the late William Edward Davis, and my mother, Sylvia Davis, and several of the my aunties who helped us open the school as well. I should probably also mention them today. Um, and so last week I shared some information about Ibrahim Traore, who's from Burkina Faso, who is currently one of two youngest rulers in the world and the youngest president or leader, not of the world, but in the world, the second, one of the two youngest members, and he is also the youngest African presidential leader, prime minister, but leader of Burkina Faso on the continent of Africa. And so I talked to him a little bit because he's young, he's military, he's college educated, a very smart guy, and he is trying to restore his country through a African worldview where they're celebrating themselves. He has dismantled some of the practices of buildings being named in honor of French people. He's removed their names from street signs, from buildings. He's restored a sense of pride in the people. He has also forced the removal of European school uniforms, and the children now have to wear African attire, and the same for people who are in the legal profession. They have to come in their traditional attire. And while those may seem like superficial things, which kind of bring people back into their spaces, he has also claimed ownership of mines and reduced the amount of foreign ownership of resources in the country. And so he's headed down a path like his predecessor by several decades, Thomas Sankara, who is the reason why Burkina Faso has retrieved that name. They used to be called Upper Volta, and Thomas Sankara made that initial step of changing the name to Burkina Faso. And he, though, however, was assassinated. And so we do pray for Traore that he will not be, Africans would not allow that to happen. That Africans who are traitors to the race or to the concept of blackness and Africanness and African control over resources would also be deterred from attacking him. I just pray his ancestors keep him safe. But this week I wanted to talk about Patrice Lumumba. For one thing, I only know historically about him through the lens of he was this leader who was also assassinated. I know a little bit more about Kwame Nkrumah, who was not assassinated, but who was also undermined. His presidential or prime minister run was undermined by the West, and also we have a real problem with elites, African elites in this country and in Africa. But anyway, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about Patrice Lumumba. I have a picture of him right here, and most of us are familiar with what he looks like. I'm a very handsome guy. But this is him. So Patrice Lumumba was born July 2nd, 1925. Imagine that. I think in about a week, Baba's birthday is going to be that same day. Well, his is on the 1st, July 1st. So happy early birthday. But anyway, So, Patrice Lumumba's birthday was July 2nd, 1925, and he was assassinated January 17th, 1961. Now, he was from the Congo, and so I have a quick picture of the Congo here. This is their flag, this Democratic Republic of Congo, and as you can see, it is huge. I'm not sure if it's it is the largest country in Africa. I have to find that out, but it is definitely a huge country. And the other thing I wanted to show was the periodic table, because a lot of times we don't know about the wealth of these countries. And I'm trying to think, where is the one I found right here, I think, of these countries. When I mentioned before, when I had um my students study the the periodic table, I wanted them to find where these resources were located in Africa. And as you can see, oh, right here, you got diamonds, gold, coltan, copper, cobalt, tin, manganese, lead, and zinc. Tin. They have a copper belt, and you have coal, uranium, and oil. And they show where it is all located in Congo. But this Democratic Republic of Congo used to be called Zaire, and they're not even showing all of the stuff that is in Congo. Congo has a lot of natural elements, and it's going to be just like Burkina Faso. It's going to be hard to get outside forces, foreign agents to out of there and keep them out of there. So it's always going to be a problem. But so back to Baba Patrice Lumumba, may his spirit and soul be really rest in peace. He was the first elected prime minister of Democratic Republic of Congo, and at the time it was called Republic of Congo. Now he was born Isai Ie Tasumbu Tawosa, and I'm not sure if I got that right, in Katakombe, Congo, in the Kasai, Belgian Congo, or whatever, in the state of Katongo. And he was 35 years old when he received this position. He was a member of the Tatela ethnic group, and he was raised Catholic, and he attended colonized schools. Um, when you read his history, he was a good student. They said he was a poet. He liked to read and write. Um, he was I think he was a beer salesman at some point, and he had these odd jobs. He was married 3 times, had 3 children by his last wife, and so he was or 2 children by his last wife, and I think he had one with one of his girlfriends or whatever. But anyway, I digress. But anyway, so he was, out here and doing things, trying to find his way. But he at some point got involved with this group. But what I wanted to talk about first is that we know that following World War II, quite a few countries, after they conveyed vened in Europe, uh, this is when they learned that all the French speaking colonies started talking to each other, and all of the British speaking colonies are speaking to each other, and all the Belgium and all those everybody who was part of that World War II, who were a part of who also were colonial ruling countries. Their people, they called their people up from these other countries, from these colonies, to come and fight. And so following the end of World War II, according to what I read, there were like 80 countries from Asia, and there are only 180 some countries in the world, right? 180 something, 84, 89, something like that. But 80 countries between 1947 and the 1990s declared their freedom. They became independent. And of course, it was because of they fought for the independence of or the freedom of Europe, and so they're like, "Well, why am I fighting for your freedom and I ain't got mine?" So they said that 80 countries um, dis fought for their independence. And then if you think about the same thing was going on here in the United States with especially the 60s. Well, the 40s, the 50s, you had the 40s, you had the Asa Philip Randolph's um, protest, or not Pullman Porters only. The Pullman Porters were part of it, but labor march in DC. And so and then you had Dr. King following that, and you had all of these movements. Even here in the United States, we were part of that space in the 1960s, finally getting civil rights legislation and all kinds of other um, legislation for housing and voting rights and all of that. So, and then you had Native Americans, you had Chicano, you had the Native American fight powwow fighting for, I can't remember the name of their movement, but they too were out fighting in the 60s for their own personal liberation. And so by 1955, Lumumba had joined this group, the Movement National Congolese, which was organized to demand independence from Belgium. And of course, Lumumba was arrested in October 1959 for inciting riots and protests against anti-colonial protests and riots, but he was eventually released. But and according to the Zen Education Project, Lumumba eventually was elected as the first prime minister of the Republic of Congo on June 24th, 1960. Um, and so on June 30th, the Belgian great, 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 great nephew of Baudouin, no, of Leopold. I'm sorry, the guy, King Leopold's great great nephew, spoke. Who he was then the king. His name was, I said it again, Baudouin, and so he spoke at this inauguration and said pretty much, "Oh, the Belgium, we did so much for you. We civilized you. We brought your country out of the dark ages, and we, just was going through all of these things that the benefits of the Belgian regime." And of course, you had, what was the guy's name? He was elected the president. I'm trying to find that dude's name. His name was God. Oh, I don't have his name here. Well, I have it, but I'll come across it later. But Lumumba was the prime minister, and then there was another guy who was elected to be the president. And so when the guy who was elected president didn't do all that, he just was quiet and he just let the dude talk. But when Lumumba got up and gave his speech, he made sure that he acknowledged the massacre of Africans, the 10 million Africans that were killed under Leopold, how many of them were maimed. There were women, children, men, fathers, mothers who were killed under this regime, and there were whole villages that were assassinated if they did not meet the quota of rubber collection. So which is another thing, they didn't show rubber, but rubber is also a natural resource, and they have these rubber trees, and rubber trees are all over Africa. I saw it myself when I was in Sierra Leone. But anyway, if they did not meet their quota, the whole village could be eliminated. And so, you know, Lumumba said, let me make sure I remind you of that. And, we think about it, we always hear about the Holocaust, the 6 million Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. And, this had just recently been, the 1950, 1960, that was still, you know, that's only 15 years. That wasn't even 20 years ago when that happened. And so everybody was still, that was a bruise. That was there was a reason for one of the reasons for this war, World War II. And so you can acknowledge that, but you can't acknowledge what Leopold did to Africans. And so he made sure he did that. Now, however, that was probably the beginning of the end for him, because how dare he confront the atrocities committed by uh, the Leopold family, the uh, the royal family in his country. And um, and so they were like, that was like, okay, we see you. And um, so although they gave symbolic control over the countries to African leaders, they refused. Most of these people, even they said, okay, we're going to let you all be free, but they were still going to go in and undermine, because we know that's what the European wealth oligarchs, they do. They're looking out for their own interests. And then how dare this black man talk all this crazy stuff to us? He had lost his mind. But in the Congo, in Republic of Congo, what they did is they said, okay, we thought he was going to just let us go through this little uh, ceremony, but we would still have control. And once they realized that, they said, okay. Um, so their reasoning was patriarchal nonsense. They didn't believe that Africa should be able to take care of itself. They didn't think the Africans were capable of taking care of themselves. They had to feed this mindset that we are the great white people, and great white men are the only ones to know how to do anything. And so you all have to follow us and obey us. And so what happened was Eisenhower, um, the British and the Belgian people all got together, and they decided that they were going to cause disruption in this country. Now, unfortunately for Lumumba, what I didn't know was that he was elected on the 24th by the people, he democratically elected, and on the 30th, the control of the country was relinquished to him. But by July 5th, a whole war had broken out. Let's see, and so there, when a war broke out between another faction, and they wanted to secede from from um, from the Republic of Congo. And so his first job, which he had only been on for about a week, was now to try to restore some balance, restore conflict. I can't remember what the name of that battle was, but it was over over a piece of land that had all of the resources, and it was led by I've got his name in here later on. Um, a guy who was a military officer. So he wanted to create this division in the country at the same time. And then one of the things that they were doing was attacking Belgium. So the Europeans that were still in the country were now under attack. So they were trying to hold on to the resources. They were removing Europeans out. And so that turned into this huge chaotic situation. And so here is Lumumba struggling to try to navigate this stuff after only 1 week of being the president. What did Lumumba want for Congo? According to the United Nations United Nations News, which was, this article was written, it was an opinion paper that by this crazy person named Brian. I don't even want to speak his name because he was so disrespectful to Lumumba. But anyway, he wanted to ensure the independence from Belgium would bring a legitimate improvement in the quality of life for all Congolese. What is evil about that? And then he wanted to unify the country as a centralized state by eliminating tribalism and regionalism. So while that was his intention, within a week, that whole thing was became a chaotic mess. Um, he believed in Pan Africanism, and in his acceptance speech, he emphasized the pride of Africa and a collaboration of equality and balance in the relationship between Congo and Belgium. So he really wasn't intending to throw the Belgium people out. What he wanted to do was create a equal partnership and balance. So these are the things he said in his speech, and these are the things he intended to do. But like I said, chaos erupted. He wanted Congolese people to benefit from the rich minerals of their land, and his vision for independence and equality clashed with U.S., Britain, and Belgium, which is insanity of white people. What can we say? They truly believe that they have a biological right to be in charge of everything. And they have been operating in this delusional state since the 1470s. So, and any vision that does not operate under their thumb is perceived as dangerous. And unfortunately for Lumumba, his acceptance speech as the first minister of the Republic of Congo alarmed Europeans, and they considered him to be having no gratitude. He was no gratitude at all. So this guy, Major Brian, who's a racist, and he had a lot of disparaging remarks in the United Nations peace. And it was interesting because while you're reading, he was angry. Lumumba didn't have any self-discipline. He was unqualified. He didn't know what he was doing, created a lot of chaos and all of that. And then when you realize that he only was in office from June 24th, 1960 to September 1960, the man was in office for 10 weeks. And all this chaos happened. And it was almost like they were trying to blame him for the chaos in the office. How can you be an effective leader in 10 weeks? Look what has happened in America in 6 months. And we still dealing with this person, and no one has taken him out. And I ain't gonna say nothing else about that. But what did he expect when he probably knew that these evildoers were planning, to undermine Patrice Lumumba? So Lumumba never had a chance to rule. On July 5th, 1960, like I said, there was all this war disruption. Lumumba reached out to the United Nations to help avoid the secession of the Katanga province, which is, there's the guy's name, Moise Humbe, who was a military leader. He called for help for that. He called to expel the Belgian soldiers, because the Belgian military also came in and they were causing a whole lot of confusion. He reached out to the Soviet Union, and nobody came to his help. Nobody came to his help. And I believe that that's because they had already figured out, the CIA is going to get him and take him out. And so he reached out to other independent African countries, and they weren't able to help him. And so he looked like this hysterical, out of control person. But when he reached out, no one came to help him. And so it just unraveled. And it's hard to blame him for this when they did not do anything to help him. And so what I found out was a lot of what was going on. The other reason that this stuff was why the other reason that this was turning into a mess is because this was also during the Cold War period. And so the Cold War happened between 1947 following World War II. Sorry, so that's when it began. And so this was the Soviet Union. We call it, that is Russia today. They wanted to go down the track of communism, and United States wanted to go down the path of capitalism. Now, remind you, the United States was just a little peon before this World War II, but because of America, the United States forces, military force, we were able to help win the World War II, and now we were at the top. And so now they're like, here comes Russia. Russia say, well, we on the top too, but we don't want to do it the way you do it. And so now they began to have these proxy wars, and there was this anybody who wanted to join the communism, that was an enemy of America. Anybody who wanted to join capitalism, that was an enemy of Soviet Union. So they were battling over these countries. And so these newly formed independent countries got caught up in the mix. And so when Lumumba reached out to the Soviet Union for help, even though they didn't come and really, I think they sent him some planes or something like that, but they didn't give him the full support that he needed. The CIA in America said, oh, we got to take him out. And so Eisenhower said, we want him out of there because he's going to continue to develop this relationship with Soviet Union. We do not want the Soviet Union to be running Africa. We want to maintain our control. So these ideological perspectives became grounds for race to influence, like I said, the newly independent countries. And so you had wars, for example, in Korea. That was a war those were proxy wars. That was a proxy war between the communism and capitalism. Same thing happened in Vietnam, proxy war. And of course, America never did achieve that. Win those wars. They didn't win that stuff. So, and this led to an arms race also. So this is why we have all these nuclear weapons. And so we know about the Bay of Pigs out here in Cuba. Cuba became communist, and so the Soviet Union wanted to put their missiles over there, and it was a whole big thing. The Cuban Missile Crisis became a communist power and a grab by Russia. And so Lumumba, unfortunately, was just a victim of this. He had not committed any crimes. There were no atrocities against people. There was no mayhem, all this brutality. This stuff was occurring because of forces outside of his control. And he was vilified by the Belgium, the UN, and the US, and the British as a chaotic and irrational leader, even though he was only 35 years old with no experience in government. Well, I'll give them that. He didn't have any experience in government, but they never even tried to help him. So the motive for his assassination, in my opinion, seemed to be completely grounded in fear and hatred. How dare this man of African descent make statements about the horrors of colonialism on his people under Leopold. And never mind, the world had just rescued the Jews from Hitler. And 6 million of them died, though. But here we have approximately 10 million people being killed by Leopold, and that we don't want to talk about that. And my opinion, his assassination, which was by a firing squad. He was buried in a shallow grave, and then he was dug up by Belgian officers and hacked and dismembered. And they said they either dissolved him in some kind of chemical, or they buried him. He burned, destroyed by fire. But these uncivilized brutes are finally facing the full destruction. I feel like America is falling along with the rest of Europe. Life is fair. But we just long live the spirit of Patrice Lumumba. Patrice is Iye Tsumba Tawosa Lumumba. Ashe, ashe, ashe.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So stop it here. You can do it if you try.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I know my mom.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can play the drums.
I'm a St. Sya student. Of course I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Sya student.